She was the architect of a billion-dollar deal the strategist trusted with international diplomacy, technical integration, and a platform that could change the industry. Then, at 2:17 a.m., she got the call. Your employment is terminated, effective immediately. No warning, no explanation, just silence. What happens when the woman who built everything gets erased overnight? Why would a company sabotage its own success right before the final signature? And what if she had seen it coming all along? This isn't a story about revenge. It's about precision. It's about what happens when a quiet, brilliant mind is underestimated and then underestimated one step too far. Her name is Lena Voss. They tried to delete her, but she left behind a system they couldn't run without and a name they couldn't erase. So stay with us if you've ever been overlooked, underestimated, or replaced. This story is for you. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because what you're about to hear isn't just a comeback. It's a quiet takeover. Let's begin. It was 2:17 a.m. when the call came. Not a message, not an email. A call, direct, intentional, designed to wake me up, or rather, to make sure I never slept again. I didn't flinch. When you're leading the closing phase of $1 billion international agreement, sleep becomes a distant memory. You're not resting. You're calculating. You're holding 100 threads together with one hand and praying no one sees the tremor in the other. I was seated in a 36th floor conference room in Singapore. Floor-to-ceiling glass wrapped the room in city light. Below, the skyline shimmered in blues and golds, impossibly quiet compared to the intensity inside. Our German counterparts were on a short break, their legal team triple-checking a clause I had rewritten at 11:47 p.m. That clause would define the jurisdiction rights for a cross-border cloud infrastructure rollout. That clause would also be my last contribution to the company I had helped build. My name is Lena Voss. I had been the Senior Global Strategy Director at Virion Technologies for almost 9 years. I was their fixer, the one they flew in when boardroom talks broke down, when governments threatened regulation, when diplomacy danced too close to collapse. I didn't just sign deals, I saved them. And now, I was about to be erased by one. The screen on my phone lit up. Morgan Skiles, CEO, Virion Technologies. For a moment, I smiled. Morgan had personally asked me to lead this deal 2 months ago in the Berlin office. He'd said, "You're the only one who understands the heartbeat of this partnership. Without you, it flatlines." I believed him. That was my first mistake. I answered without hesitation. "Lena," he said, voice flat, unreadable. Then a pause, a long one. "Then, this is official, effective immediately. Your employment with Virion Technologies has been terminated." My breath didn't catch. My hands didn't shake. The silence inside me was too loud for that. He kept talking. I didn't hear a word. The city outside the window blinked back at me. Somewhere, a train was crossing the bridge over Marina Bay. I could hear its echo, soft and distant, like a memory I hadn't made yet. When I finally looked back at my laptop, the screen had refreshed. "Access denied. You no longer have permission to view this document." I stared, blinked, tried again. Same result. I opened the global directory. Gone. All the files, 8 months of negotiations, notes, technical documentation, signed revisions, partner threads disappeared, like someone had snapped their fingers and wiped me off the map. I walked back to the meeting room. The Germans were laughing softly. sipping espresso from ceramic cups with gold rims. They had no idea. I sat down, folded my hands over the closed laptop, and said with a gentle nod, "Let's take another 5 minutes. I'd like to review something before we resume." No emotion, no signal of what had just happened, because I understood something in that moment that would take Morgan weeks to realize. They thought they had ended me with a phone call. They had no idea what I'd already begun. Back in my hotel suite, I stared at the soft pulse of the bedside lamp. I hadn't turned it on. It was motion sensitive. Maybe it sensed the collapse. My reflection in the window looked unfamiliar, like someone wearing my skin, but not quite fitting inside it. I took off my blazer, hung it carefully, then sat down at the desk, typed in my company login. Still worked, but the dashboard was empty. Empty folders, muted inbox, the silence of a machine programmed to forget me. I clicked on the one thing I hoped was still there, a file labeled Blueprint V Layer 5, an internal backup I had created out of habit, out of instinct. It opened. My hands trembled slightly, not with fear, with something colder, sharper. In the corner of the room was a glass award from last year's executive summit, Lena Voss Excellence in Global Strategy. I picked it up, not to admire it, to look at the fingerprint smudges I had never cleaned, proof I had touched something real. Then I dropped it, let it shatter. There's a grief that comes not from loss, but from deletion, being removed so thoroughly, so precisely, that even your memory becomes suspect. They didn't just fire me, they scrubbed me, as if I had never existed. But here's the part Morgan didn't count on. You can't delete the architect, and tomorrow he would wake up and realize the system he thought he owned still ran on code he never understood because I was the one who built it. Back in the quiet of my suite, I sat in the dark. The city lights still shimmered outside. Neon streaks reflected in the tall windows like ghosts of movement, of memory. But inside, everything felt still, still and hollow. I stared at my inbox. There were only 4 unread emails, each one shorter than the last, each one more sterile. No explanation, no follow-up. Just cold corporate closures. A digital shrug. I clicked into the contract thread I had led for almost a year, the one with over 200 back-and-forth revisions, red lines, approvals. My name was gone from the senders, gone from the CC list, gone from the metadata. It was like I had never been there at all. My cursor hovered over one document, a version of the data sharing agreement I had personally rewritten 3 times to accommodate German data sovereignty requirements. I knew the structure. I had shaped it. But now it had been reshaped. Line 78. In the event of executive absence, rights shall be transferred to the acting CEO with retroactive applicability. That clause wasn't mine. And yet, my name was there. My signature, at least, what looked like it. But I knew the way my V curved when I signed under stress. The forged version flattened it just enough to catch the eye of someone who'd written it 1,000 times. I leaned back, exhaled. They hadn't just erased me. They had written over me. They'd copied my handwriting, stolen my authorship, and rewritten my legacy into a permission slip, a fake signature of surrender. I got up and walked to the bathroom, splashed water on my face. The mirror didn't help. The woman looking back at me didn't look defeated, but she didn't look like herself either. She looked suspended. A part of me whispered, maybe this is the cost. Maybe this is what happens when you let your guard down. I sat back at the desk and opened a folder I had archived months ago. Not on the cloud, not synced to the company network, local only, encrypted, inside meeting transcripts, negotiation notes, voice memos, strategy outlines. Mine. I clicked on a recording a dinner 3 weeks earlier at the Executive Summit in San Francisco. The memory felt distant, but the voice was unmistakable. Morgan Skiles. Lena isn't just a strategist. She's the spine of this project. Without her, none of this happens. Applause, glasses clinking, laughter, compliments. I had smiled that night. I'd even blushed a little, tightening my grip on the stem of a glass of Shiraz like I needed something to anchor me. I had believed him. That was my second mistake. That same night, just after dessert, I had stepped out to take a call from my brother Ben. He was working part-time with the catering crew, finishing grad school. When I returned to the ballroom, he pulled me aside. You didn't hear that, right? Hear what Morgan? He was talking to someone. I think the CFO. He said, once the deal closes, they're replacing you. Already picked someone else. Said you'd never see it coming. I laughed it off then, told him not to worry, told myself he must have misheard. But now it felt like the only moment of truth in the whole evening. I sat frozen, the ache building just under my rib cage. Not from the betrayal itself, but from the slow rewind of everything I'd chosen to ignore. The signs, the tone shifts, the delays in communication, the way Morgan had started replying with one-word answers, the way my team leads had grown quieter, the way I had told myself it was just stress, just pressure, just projection. I should have known better. In the corner of the room, my phone buzzed. A message from Dana Chen, the friend I had trusted since our early days at Virion. Need to talk. Something's off with the contracts. I replied instantly. Call me. Private line. 10 minutes later, we were connected. Her voice was low, tired, but clear. Lena, your signature appears on 3 documents you didn't sign. 2 of them grant full legal authority to Morgan. 1 authorizes him to act as international proxy. She paused, then added, metadata shows they were uploaded the night before your flight to Singapore. That's not a coincidence. Silence stretched between us like a wire pulled tight. I'm sorry, she said. You were right to feel something was wrong. I didn't answer. Not because I had nothing to say, but because the pieces had finally clicked. This wasn't negligence. This wasn't a political reshuffle. This was a surgical deletion, and whoever had cut me out had done it with the precision of someone who knew where every vein ran because they had walked beside me for years. In the dark, I whispered, they didn't just replace me. They used me to replace myself. And now, all I had left to ask was this. How far had the rewrite gone? By sunrise. I wasn't numb anymore. I was cold, focused, still bleeding. Yes, but bleeding into a blueprint. Grief. I realized has layers. And somewhere beneath the shock, beneath the betrayal, beneath the humiliation was something sharper. Certainty. At 6:12 a.m., I opened a secondary laptop, one I had carried only for non-corporate travel, unbranded, encrypted, and clean. I didn't need it for work. I brought it out of habit, out of suspicion. Maybe I had known, or maybe I just never learned how to trust without conditions. I logged into my private archive. The folder names were quiet, innocuous, but one stood out. Trace log, decoy, reality. Inside were side copies of the German infrastructure agreement, every draft, time-stamped. I had exported them weekly for review purposes, or so I told myself. I clicked through versions, comparing edit histories. On draft 4.6a, a line appeared under a section, I had never written executive authority shall transition upon internal reassignment without external notice. That clause wasn't in 4.5. It wasn't in 4.6. It arrived in 4.6a 5 hours before I received Morgan's call. Someone had rewritten the script, and they had backdated my name into it. That was the trick. It wasn't that they just removed me. They made it look like I handed everything over willingly. I needed more, not just suspicion, not just instinct, proof. I sent a message through an encrypted channel to Dana. We had used it before during a compliance review in the Singapore pipeline deal 2 years ago. Check access logs for drafts 4.6a to 5.0, especially signature metadata. If anyone touched them between 9 p.m. and 3 a.m. Singapore time, I need name, IP, login pattern. Quietly. She replied in under 10 minutes, give me an hour. Don't do anything rash. Too late. I wasn't waiting anymore. While I waited, I messaged another name, one I hadn't used in over 6 months. Elliot Reyes, former forensic analyst at Virion, now freelance, paranoid, brilliant, a little chaotic, but loyal if you gave him truth and purpose. Need a clean scrub of all backend edits on Virion's remote server, dated Thursday, 6 to 11 p.m. GMT. Same firewall we tested in Geneva. Node cluster 3. Payment upfront. He responded with a thumbs up emoji. Then, if I find what I think you're looking for, I won't charge. I'll just want to watch the fallout. 43 minutes later, Dana called. No greeting, just her voice, low and fast. The edits were made from an admin override account. Credentials tied to Theo Brandt. I blinked. Theo, the junior associate who sits 2 chairs behind you in legal. Yeah, his name's on the log, but the edit pattern doesn't match his writing style. So someone used his credentials. Exactly. And Lena, the final edit before you were locked out. It was made at 1:52 a.m. I looked at the clock. Morgan called me at 2:17. They flipped the switch. Then they made the call. A notification popped up on my backup laptop from Elliot. Attached was a zipped folder titled Foreground Fraud. The message read, Signature strokes don't match your 2021 NDA. Whoever copied you got lazy. They reversed the downstroke. Rookie mistake. And then, just below it, also found one ghost signature file from the proxy chain, created 3 days before your flight. You were listed as author. Morgan was listed as signer. That doc granted him full legal authority to act on your behalf in all international negotiations. I stared at the screen. No breathing, no blinking. They had built a weapon with my name on it and handed it to the one man who was already sharpening the knife. I pushed my chair back and stood, not to run, but to pause, to let my spine realign under the weight of the truth. There was something sacred in stillness, and I had learned over the years never move too fast after betrayal. Let the silence become a tool. I picked up my phone and typed 4 words into a new note. He didn't act alone, because this level of coordination wasn't impulsive. It was orchestration, surgical, precise. It wasn't panic. It was a plan. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, not to send another message, but to start one. A new folder, new label, red line, active counter inside it. I placed the forged signature file, the IP logs, the metadata screenshots, and then a short audio memo to myself. If they want to write me out of history, they'll have to delete more than a name. They'll have to burn every blueprint. But what they forgot, I never billed in just one place. At 7:41 a.m., I walked out onto the small balcony of my suite. Singapore was already humming streets below, flickering with scooters, early joggers, and the first wave of commuters chasing deadlines they didn't own. The air was thick with humidity, but it didn't matter, because I had already started breathing differently. There's a kind of liberation that doesn't come from escape. It comes from recognition. The moment you realize the walls weren't built to protect you, they were built to keep you contained. And I had stopped playing contained a long time ago. 6 weeks earlier, in late September, I'd made a decision. It wasn't loud. It wasn't bitter. It was quiet, intentional, surgical. The deal with the Germans was still tangled GDPR conflicts, multi-jurisdiction licensing, complicated IP transfers. I suggested a temporary holding structure to handle the initial execution phase, a third-party intermediary, neutral. I had called it. They nodded. Legal approved. Compliance checked a few boxes. And no one thought twice when I said, I'll handle the entity setup. They assumed I'd use a shell firm, a legal placeholder, but I didn't. Instead, I created Solvanta Limited, registered in Zurich, funded privately, clean papers, distinct tax ID, and one sole executive officer, Lena Voss. The name meant something. Solvanta, a blend of Latin roots. Solvus, unbound, plus Avanta, ahead. A future I would step into unbound. The system was quiet, but powerful. Solvanta held the initial rights to shared infrastructure, technical deployment, data licensing, transitional oversight. It was the ghost gate, the transitional legal container, and no one noticed. Because I didn't hide it. I just didn't explain it. I opened a secure window and logged into the Swiss Federal Commercial Registry. The screen blinked. Entity verified, active, compliant, listed executive Lena Voss. Then I opened the deal's most recent draft 5.2a. I scrolled to the clause I had inserted myself. All transitional system rights shall be provisionally managed by the third-party intermediary Solvanta Limited, with full administrative control until Phase 2 transfer. I smiled, not smugly, just quietly, because Morgan and the board may have removed me from the company, but they forgot to check who was holding the keys to the system. They thought I was just the architect of the deal, but I was also the one who built the bridge it stood on. And now they were trying to cross that bridge without realizing I controlled the toll. My phone buzzed. A message from Dana. Internal fires spreading. Morgan's trying to explain the override doc. Board wants forensic logs. Thought you'd want to know. I responded, let it burn slow. Then I dialed a number I hadn't used in months. Clara Stein, lead architect on the German side, head of technology partnerships. She answered on the second ring. Lena, funny timing. I was just reviewing the server clause in your last draft. I need a 5-minute sync. Off record. Go. I took a breath. Clara, I'm no longer with Virion. I was terminated during negotiations. Silence. Then, what they forged authorization documents, locked me out of the system, and replaced me in communication. But Solvanta still controls the core infrastructure. I need to know if they've reached out. She exhaled hard. Yes, late last night, a man named Keller from their transition team tried to accelerate the system key exchange. We stalled, said we needed verification. You did the right thing. The system keys weren't theirs to give. Lena, are you telling me Virion lost control of the infrastructure? They never had it. I hung up, then sat back, feeling the full force of the silence I had created. Not as a reaction, as a strategy, because now the bridge was mine, and they were still trying to cross it with counterfeit maps. I leaned over the desk and opened the dashboard for the testing environment. The Solvanta grid, node access, secure last login attempt, rejected biometric mismatch, triggered override lock, user M, Skiles admin, Time 4:03 a.m. They tried again, and they failed. Because when I built the system, I encoded one final override retina and facial recognition of the architect, me. Even root-level access meant nothing if the system didn't see my face. I whispered to no one, "You erased my name from the paperwork," but I hard-coded it into the system. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about ownership of my work, my value, my voice. I opened a new document, titled it Execution Protocol, Phase 0. At the top, I typed, "They didn't see me coming, but they're about to see what happens when you fire the one holding the foundation." At exactly 1:14 p.m. Singapore time, I walked into the co-working lounge on the 11th floor of my hotel. Not the main one, a smaller corner space I had quietly rented for just such moments. No branding, no corporate headers, just a plain desk, a second laptop, and silence. This was my war room. I powered up the Solvanta terminal and opened the most recent agreement from the German team. Clause 7.4 had been updated overnight. It included a handoff schedule. Apparently, Morgan had offered to finalize access by end of week. That was bold, considering he couldn't even open the dashboard without setting off a biometric lock. I scrolled down to verify the source of the revision, initiated by M. Skiles Virion Tech, com. Clara hadn't been exaggerating. He was already pretending the transfer was in motion. It wasn't. At 1:27 p.m., I placed the call. Private international line, end-to-end encrypted, no company affiliation. On the other end, Clara Stein picked up again. "I've got 5 minutes board call at 1:40. Go. You should know the proposed access transition is invalid. Virion has no authority over Solvanta systems." She paused. "So you're saying Solvanta still holds primary rights, correct? And I'm prepared to issue formal documentation, including back-end logs showing override attempts. You realize if this is true, our board won't just pause. They'll replace the counterparty. That's the point." Her voice dropped an octave. "Is this your move?" "Lena, the comeback play." I smiled faintly. "It's not a comeback. It's a correction." She didn't ask more. She didn't need to. By 1:52 p.m., the first legal notice had been dispatched internally by Helix Tech Group, the German partner's parent company. Subject pending review of counterparty control authority, Solvanta Lantide. I watched the message ripple across the internal system like a pebble dropped in a quiet lake, and I knew what was next. At 2:11 p.m., Elliot messaged, "Just got a ping from the Frankfurt data center. Virion tried to override node lockout again. Failed. Board-level user this time." "Morgan," I asked. "No. Someone higher. Board chair. I think. You could better than good." I didn't respond again. I didn't need to, because now the silence was working for me. They weren't shouting. They were scrambling, trying to explain why the deal they thought they controlled was running on a system they couldn't touch. And worse, why the only person who could unlock it was the woman they just fired. At 3:38 p.m., I received a call. Blocked ID. I let it ring 4 times, then answered. Morgan's voice sharp, forced calm. "Lena, we need to talk." "No, we don't. We're trying to contain a situation that seems to be spiraling. It would help if Morgan. You signed off on documents you knew were forged. You used admin override to block access. You told partners I'd been reassigned. That's not a situation. That's fraud." Silence. Then, flatly, "What do you want?" "Nothing." "You're bluffing." "Then why can't you get in?" I ended the call. 10 minutes later, Dana sent a message, "Emergency board meeting underway. Rumors flying. They still think they can spin it. Let them try, I replied. At 4:22 p.m., Clara's assistant confirmed via secure channel board is reviewing Solvanta credentials. If documentation aligns, counterparty shift will be formalized before end of week, and if it doesn't, I asked, then they'll stall. But they won't go back to Virion. You've proven their negligence. Good. I leaned back, letting the quiet hold me. No press statements, no threats, no legal battles, just precision. When you've been erased, there's a temptation to shout, to rage, to burn it all down, but I didn't want to burn anything. I wanted them to watch it run without them. At 5:08 p.m., Elliot sent the final message of the day. Logs show Solvanta now flagged as primary system controller by Helix Tech. All partner integrations routed through your keys. You own the architecture. I stood by the window as the sun dipped over the Singapore skyline. Orange haze softened the hard lines of the buildings. And somewhere, down in Virion's headquarters in New York, I imagined someone asking the one question Morgan couldn't answer: who authorized Solvanta to hold the backbone? And all Morgan could say was, nothing, because that's what silence does. It waits, it sharpens, and then it speaks not in volume, but in outcomes. The morning Zurich light was soft and gold. It spilled over the rooftops, catching on church steeples and glass towers alike. The kind of morning that made even power feel quiet, not like conquest, but completion. I stood at the window of a rented suite on Bahnhofstrasse. Solvanta's name was on the lease. It was 6:01 a.m., and I was ready. The final contract had landed in my inbox 2 hours earlier. No red lines, no pending clarifications, no legal stalls, just one clear instruction, signature required before 6:30. Board vote follows. I opened the file. The screen blinked once, then loaded 2 blank fields. One read Helix Tech board approval, the other authorized counterparty, Solvanta Limited. Beneath it, Chief Executive Officer Lena Voss. No footnote, no on behalf of, no acting as representative, just me. For a moment, my hands paused, not from hesitation, from weight, not fear, but gravity, the kind of weight that comes after surviving something designed to erase you. I clicked assign. Confirmation flashed. Timestamp 6:03 a.m. Document executed. Then, a clause summary appeared. Standard process, except this one wasn't standard. Clause 19.7, all infrastructure, system architecture, and operational tech developed under joint execution shall remain under the full control of Solvanta Limited. Virion Technologies is not a recognized party for integration access or deployment. I leaned back. That clause, I had inserted it 4 months ago. At the time, legal had marked it pending review, but they never removed it, too busy replacing me to notice I'd secured everything they wanted in my own name. My phone buzzed. Elliot, just FYI, Virion tried accessing the Zurich node again. Denied. System now flags their requests as external. Also, data migration to Helix Tech is live. Then another buzz. Dana, internal audit triggered. Virion board suspended Morgan from active duty this morning. Statement says, pending investigation into unauthorized executive decisions. Then one more. Clara, congratulations. Board approved full counterparty shift to Solvanta. Vote was unanimous. I closed my eyes and let it all land. Not in triumph, in stillness, the kind that feels like truth settling into its rightful place. They had tried to bury my name. Instead, they built their empire on a system that couldn't run without it. At 7:46 a.m., an email came in from Helix Tech's CEO. Subject: gratitude and clarity from Raphael Lenz. Ms. Voss, I've reviewed your original strategy notes, technical specs, and integration logs. Your foresight, your restraint, and your integrity made it clear we signed with the right person, not just the right structure. Thank you. RL. I sat with that for a long time, because it wasn't just a professional nod. It was acknowledgement, a restoration. Across the world, Virion Technologies was unraveling. Reports had begun leaking. News outlets picked up the story. Virion loses billion-dollar deal to unknown Swiss entity. Sources confirm CEO bypassed legal protocol. Whistleblowers' quiet move shifts. Global tech partnership. But I didn't comment. I didn't retweet. I didn't even update my LinkedIn. Because some victories don't require a podium. They just require presence. Later that day, I stood in the Solvanta office, simple, sunlit, still, no nameplate, no ceremony, just a clean desk, and a woman who refused to be erased. A journalist reached out, one who had once profiled Virion's rise. They wanted to interview the mind behind Solvanta. I declined, but left a short written quote. They erased my name from the contract, so I wrote it into the system, and now it runs with or without applause. That quote spread further than I expected. Startups began referencing it in pitch decks. A few even printed it on posters in their break rooms. Not because it was clever, because it meant something. To anyone who's been made to feel invisible, to those who built something only to be told they don't belong in the room, to every voice softened, every hand ignored, every blueprint dismissed. This wasn't just my story. It was a reminder you don't have to burn the building down. You can build a better one and walk through the front door with your name on the foundation. She didn't scream. She didn't beg. She didn't burn the company to the ground. She just walked away with the blueprint, with the system, with the quiet kind of power no one saw coming because they never bothered to look. This is what happens when we treat people like tools instead of humans, when loyalty is seen as expendable, when brilliance is acknowledged in public and betrayed in private. It's not just a mistake, it's a pattern. And Lena Voss, she didn't just survive it. She turned that betrayal into a new beginning, one that didn't just serve her, it served truth. If this story made you feel something, anger, admiration, hope, then maybe it's time we ask bigger questions. How many voices are we silencing in our own rooms, and who are we overlooking that we should be empowering? If you've ever been underestimated, this channel is for you. Leave a comment. Like the video if it hit home. Share it with someone who needs to be reminded of their worth. And don't forget to subscribe, because we're just getting started. Stories like this aren't rare. They're just rarely told. And we're here to change that.